Welcome to today's scary story from Reddit.
So, my uncle used to work a lot when I was younger. He's done a lot of different things to make money, but one consistent thing is that in the summer months and into late fall he paints houses. It's a legitimate business and everything. He's got a truck with a number, and a name, and supplies in the back, the works. Every now and then he would call my dad when he needed a little extra help and I'd work for him. No big deal, really, it's just painting houses. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it takes a while to paint a whole house. If the weather conditions aren't right then you can't paint. One particular fall was extremely wet. It rained what felt like every single day. My uncle would paint multiple houses at a time, so sometimes he would get caught up due to situations like these, and I'd work a little more than usual. That was fine by me though. The job wasn't hard and it paid well. Anyway, it was a warm day for late fall, but there was still a distinct chill in the air. One that kinda penetrated through you and stung your soul. My uncle had this job he had to finish. It was an old Victorian house in a quiet part of town. A lady and her husband, who was an author, lived there. Due to the weather it had taken longer than expected to paint the house, and there were family issues going on at the time, which further complicated things. So, my uncle gets a call one day from the lady who lives at the house. She says that her husband is trying to write his next book, but he keeps getting distracted by the scaffolding outside the house, so she wanted to know if we could come over and finish the job as soon as possible. My uncle was always an honest businessman. They had contracted him to do the job in midsummer, but he had lots of jobs that summer, and the wet conditions I mentioned made it difficult to finish anything. However, these people were insistent but really polite, and not wanting to lose customers or get a bad recommendation, my uncle decided to put the house as a high priority. After all, it would only take a day or two to finish. So, we show up to this house mid-afternoon. Like I said, it was a weird kinda chilly that day, and I also remember a really eerie calm. The day was slightly overcast, so everything was shrouded in gray. It was like the perfect setting for a mystery crime novel. So we arrive at this house and my uncle and I move to the back. The front of the house was already done so there was nothing left there. My uncle, being the more experienced painter, would always do the touch-ups, and I would simply apply the first coats, since they took little skill. Anyway, we get to the back of the house and he asks me if I'm scared of heights. I was 17 at the time, and although they do creep me out a little, I didn't want to seem like a child in front of my uncle, so I told him I wasn't. He was happy to hear that. He has me climb up the scaffold to the third floor to finish an upper section of the house. There was a window up there, a small little oval one that looked into the attic. The attic also happened to be the husband's study. He would do most of his writing in there. So, I'm climbing up the scaffolding, cans of paint dangling behind me and various paint brushes and other tools in the utility belt my uncle let me borrow. I get to the top of the scaffolding and set all my supplies down. I crack open a can of paint and start painting like I had a few hundred times before. Outside of the temperature, the overcast, and the eerie calm this day was like any other. I'm working my way across the top part of the house when I get to the window that looks into the study. I bend down, dip my paintbrush, and stand back up to paint above the window. The window was in my direct line of sight and I couldn't help gazing in. I see a man, the husband, staring back at me with a face completely barren of any emotion. I had never seen a face so devoid of feeling before. I still haven't. Of course, I get startled and take a step back. I chuckle and smile at the guy. But he doesn't smile back. Instead, while remaining completely emotionless, he draws a pistol up to his head that he was holding in his hand the whole time and proceeds to blow his brains out, without ever breaking eye contact, right in front of me, while I'm staring at him. In utter shock I gasp and let out the smallest scream as I step back in fear. Only, I stepped back a step too much and fell off the scaffolding. Alerted by the gunshot, my uncle looked up in just enough time to see me fall off the scaffolding from the third story. I was lucky enough to land in a bush and only suffer a broken ankle and a few scratches. The biggest wounds happened in my head. I had to go to counseling for a while. It's been years since then, and I still remember that man's face. I've never forgotten it. It will always be burned in the back of my head. I know why. Looking back, his face was so devoid of emotion, because he never felt any emotion at all. He literally didn't care about what he was doing. As it turns out, the man was seriously depressed and facing marital issues with his wife. Combined with a few too many nights drunk on whiskey and facing writer's block, I guess he decided he couldn't take it anymore. His wife moved out of the house shortly after and we never finished the job. To this day the house remains abandoned and to this day I try not to drive down the street it's on. I'm scared that if I do and happen to pass the backyard, I'll see that man staring back at me from that window, cold and emotionless.
Hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe for more.